So real quick, one more time. So we have all these QR codes. This is 100 chunks of $10 worth of Bitcoin. I'm gonna pass these out, and then we're gonna leave them out for people to claim over the next couple days. So just to say real quick, so you understand how these work, and so you can share the word to other people. Basically, if you scan the QR code by the end of the month, you get $10 free Bitcoin. And then if you set up if you once you open up the app, you'll see how it works. It's very user friendly, very straightforward. Even if you don't want to buy Bitcoin, this app also has a bank account attached to it that gives you like 3% interest. So even if you don't want to buy Bitcoin, you just want like a high yield savings account where you don't have to lock it up like a CD or something, you can get 3% interest. So that's nice. So anyway, $10 free Bitcoin. The encouragement is buy some, hold it, wait a year, Bitcoin will be higher, wait 5 years will be higher, wait 20 years will be higher. And so, yeah, thank you all for letting me join. Appreciate it.
Luke Broyles, everybody. That was solid, brother. Thank you. And don't think of it as $10. Think of it as your next house, and right. Yeah, for your grandkids, whatever. Intergenerational wealth. That was wonderful. So again, thank you, Luke. Coming right on up here, we are going to have Excited About Liberty with Mr. Free. And yes, I know we're running just a touch behind because we always do. We're libertarians, but whatever. Nah, dude, okay. Yeah, we put the times on the program. Sometimes people run over, sometimes people run short, but yeah, we're flexible here. It's liberty. That being said, before we introduce our next speaker, I do want to reiterate that 50/50 sales are officially open, and we have our tickets are 3 for $5, 8 for $10, 18 for $20, and 40 for $40. So I will be going around selling those. So just hit me up whenever if you want to participate in some good gambling. Drawing's going to be tomorrow at 5 o'clock. That being said, our next speaker, in fact, this is not the only thing he's going to be doing. He's got some good stuff lined up for us. But he goes by Free, how appropriate. And this talk is entitled Excited About Liberty.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you. All right, so I don't think the liberty movement has an idea problem. I think we have an excitement problem. And before somebody tosses me in the lake, just hear me out on this, okay? Because I love our ideas. We have the best ideas in the world. I think that liberty is one of the most exciting ideas in human history. But think about what you're actually saying. You know, your life belongs to you. You should be free to build, free to create, free to start a business, free to raise your family, free to speak, free to question authority, free to peacefully live differently from everyone else around you. And underneath that all, something bigger. We believe that ordinary people are capable of doing extraordinary things. We don't need somebody in DC to run our lives. We don't need permission to solve every problem. We don't need a government problem to have two neighbors help each other. We believe that millions of people making millions of voluntary decisions can create things no central planner could ever imagine. And that's really exciting. So why aren't more people excited about it? Seriously. People stand in line overnight to buy the newest iPhone. People fly across the country to see their favorite band. People paint their faces to go to a football game. People spend thousands of dollars taking their families to places like Disney. People do extraordinary things for experiences they're excited about. And then we say to them, hey, would you like to attend our weekly meeting? And somehow, they end up being busy and they don't have time for that. Why? I don't think it's because liberty's boring. I think sometimes we make liberty boring. I think we have ideas about entrepreneurship and then we present them without creativity. I think we believe in innovation, but then we keep using the same formats over and over again. We talk about human flourishing, while sometimes we look absolutely miserable doing what we're doing. We build voluntary cooperation. We believe that voluntary cooperation can build civilization, and then we spend hours arguing about Robert's Rules of Order. There might be a disconnect here. So I started asking myself, what is the problem if it's not our ideas? And what if the problem is the experience that surrounds our ideas? So that question led me to create something that probably sounds like it wouldn't work. I created a political game show, Are You Smarter Than a Politician? Even saying it out loud in front of a group of people, it sounds really ridiculous, okay? So, but that's one of the reasons I really liked it. Political media has become too predictable. Interview, podcast, panel, debate, repeat. A lot of it was good, but I kept wondering, what would happen if we made politics actually fun? If we took serious political ideas, but then put them inside of a game? Contestants, score, lightning rounds, hot takes, arguments, jokes, competition, different ideologies, people actually enjoying themselves while disagreeing. People, and then something happened. People watched, people shared it, people came back. People who might not sit through a traditional political program watched our political commentators compete in a game show. And eventually I realized something important. I hadn't changed the ideas, I had changed the experience. So the game didn't make the ideas less serious, it just made people more willing to engage with them. And so that became a much bigger lesson to me. I started seeing that pattern everywhere. The causes that grow aren't always the causes with the best arguments. The events people return to aren't always the one with the biggest speakers. The people who build communities aren't the ones with the fanciest titles. Very often something else is happening. People feel something: curiosity, belonging, hope, energy, purpose, momentum. Those feelings pull people closer. So I stopped asking, how do we convince more people to believe in liberty? And I started asking, how do we create a liberty movement people are more excited to experience? And that's what I'm here to talk about today. So along the way, I noticed another pattern. Most of the things that changed my life weren't massive transformations. They were small adjustments, tiny decisions, a conversation, an introduction, a new habit, a different question, one opportunity, one person believing in somebody else. Small things that changed everything that came afterward. And that eventually led me to the idea for my book, 1 Degree. And that concept is incredibly simple. 1 degree doesn't sound like much. If the temperature out here raised 1 degree right now, most people wouldn't notice. Nothing dramatic would happen. But if it kept raising 1 degree at a time, eventually everybody would notice. So sometimes, 1 degree changes everything. You raise water from 211 degrees to 212 degrees and it boils. So that 1 degree makes it cross a threshold. So think about navigation. Imagine a plane leaves an airport 1 degree off course. Nobody's going to notice anything right off the bat. But mile after mile, that tiny difference compounds and eventually you end up where that you were intending. So that's 1 degree. We have a tendency to think about transformation that it requires transformative sized actions. Change everything, the giant organization, write the perfect plan, fix the country, build the movement. And the size of the goal overwhelms us before we even start. So 1 degree asks us a different question. What's the smallest calibration I can make right now that moves me towards where I want to go? One better conversation, one introduction, one person welcomed, one volunteer thanked, 1 degree and another degree and another degree. Those individual actions on their own don't look significant, but they become something and the trajectory becomes achievement. There's one example I want you to carry with you today. Every room has a temperature. As you can tell by me sweating a little bit, this one's a little higher than most, but I don't mean the actual temperature. I don't mean the thermostat. I mean, every room has an emotional temperature. You felt this. Sometimes you walk into a room and it's alive. People are laughing. Ideas are flying. People are introducing each other. Someone's building something. You just feel good being there. And then there's other rooms you walk in and somehow you're exhausted before you even sat down. Same number of people, completely different temperature. Why? Because everybody contributes something. Energy or cynicism, hope or fear, curiosity, generosity, encouragement. Every time you enter a room, you change it. Maybe only 1 degree, but that's enough. Imagine 50 people each deciding each room I enter will be better because I was there. One person welcomes somebody, another makes an introduction, someone tells a joke, somebody gives an encouraging idea, somebody notices the volunteer that nobody thanked, somebody invites the person standing alone into their group. One person can elevate the room one degree, then another, and eventually we're not talking about individual behavior anymore. We're talking about culture. That's what I want us thinking about today, not how do we fix the entire liberty movement. That's overwhelming. Instead, I want to talk about how do we elevate a room. And I'm going to give you 10 easy ways to do this. I call them my 10 one-degree calibrations. Some are ridiculously simple. They might change how you run an event. They might change how you communicate. Some might change how you think about leadership, but everyone has the same goal. Make liberty something people want to move towards. Not because we pressured them, not because we scared them, not because we won an argument. We want to be like that because someone saw us and thought, I want to be part of that. So let's start with the easiest place. What if liberty was fun? So this is calibration number 1. Make liberty fun. People don't fall in love with arguments. They fall in love with experiences. So Disney doesn't really sell rides. Apple doesn't really sell phones. Harley Davidson doesn't just sell motorcycles. Professional sports teams don't just sell games. They're selling something bigger, a feeling, identity, anticipation, belonging, memories, experience. That's why somebody's willing to spend $150 on a football jersey, then spend hours screaming the name of a millionaire that they've never met. They just love being part of experiences. And here's where I think movements get this wrong. We assume that because an idea is important, the experience surrounding it doesn't have to be that good. It does. Imagine a restaurant that opens, it has the greatest steak in America, but the rest of the experience is bad. It's a dingy environment, it smells bad, nobody greets you, service is slow, somebody argues with you if you ask a question. Would you recommend it? No. But the owner would say, objectively, the steak is excellent. Maybe, but people experience the whole restaurant, right? So they don't experience just the steak in isolation. People experience movements in the same way. They don't encounter our philosophy in a vacuum. They encounter us, our events, our websites, our conversations, our personalities, our organizations, our culture. It all becomes part of the message. So if we're telling people freedom produces human flourishing and every event feels miserable, we've created a problem. So the experience is part of the message. This is something I've learned through the game show. The fun isn't separate from the mission. The fun helps accomplish the mission. So laughter lowers defenses, games create participation, competition attracts attention, surprise creates curiosity, and curiosity creates an opening for ideas. That's very different than assuming the information is important, therefore people should listen. Nobody owes us their attention. We have to earn it. And we're competing against everything. Netflix, YouTube, football, video games, their friends, their families, their jobs. Basically, every piece of entertainment ever created is sitting in their pockets right now, and we're standing there holding a brochure, okay? We've got to bring our A game, okay? So some actionable tips on that. Start with participation. Invite creative people into serious projects. Make families part of the experience. End while people still want more and ask, what will they talk about tomorrow? And like I said, these can be done with simple 1-degree calibrations. Make one person laugh, introduce 2 people, thank one overlooked volunteer, invite one first-timer into something, ask how could this be 1% more fun? None of these things require a budget. None of these things require permission. You could do it. You could do every one of these things here before this festival ends. That's the point. It's just 1 degree. Okay, so the second one is become the person people want to be around. People get excited about ideas when they get excited about the people carrying them. Think about someone who changed your life. You probably know who it is. They came to mind instantly. Now think about what they actually did. Did they overwhelm you with information? Did they win an argument against you? Did they hand you a complex reading list? Probably not, right? Probably they believed in you, encouraged you, opened a door, made an introduction, saw something in you that you hadn't seen yet. Sometimes the people that change our lives barely remember doing it. For them, it was one conversation. For us, it changed everything. That's 1 degree. People experience ideas through people. So we spend an enormous time thinking about messaging. What's the perfect argument? What's the perfect slogan? What's the perfect statistic? Those things, of course, matter. But here's something much more simple. People associate ideas with the people carrying them. If someone meets 5 liberty-minded people and all 5 are angry and argumentative and negative and constantly talking about how terrible everything is, what's the emotional association they're going to build up with liberty? It's probably not going to be, wow, I need more people like that in my life. Now imagine the opposite. They meet 5 of us who are curious, funny, generous, interesting, building things, helping people, enjoying their lives. Suddenly they're asking, who are these people? That's the curiosity that we want. And then that curiosity opens doors that arguments can never do. Sometimes the best way to get someone interested in your philosophy is to become somebody that people enjoy being around. So be the person that changes the temperature. This is the idea of where elevating the room becomes practical. Every group has a temperature setter. Sometimes it's the leader. Oftentimes it's not. It's the person whose energy spreads because they're excited and other people get excited. But if they're cynical, then maybe other people get cynical. And if they're welcoming, then other people start welcoming people. And if they're complaining soon, everybody's complaining. So culture is contagious. And here's the great news. You don't need to be in charge to change it. You don't need to be the president, or you don't need to be the speaker on the stage. You don't need a giant audience. You can walk into any room and immediately start making tiny calibrations. Introduce 2 people, thank someone, ask a newcomer their name, make someone laugh, celebrate an idea. 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree, and suddenly people are having a completely different experience because you were there. That's the influence. My next point is be the connector. One of the most valuable roles I found for myself in the liberty movement is connecting people. I love finding 2 people and thinking, you 2 need to know each other. Maybe one has an audience and the other has a cause. Maybe one has a platform and the other would be willing to be a guest. Maybe one needs encouragement and the other's already taken that road. The introduction may only take 30 seconds. But what happens afterwards could last years. And I think that's something all of us can do more often. Instead of walking into a room and thinking, who do I need to meet here? Try thinking, who should meet each other? Now that's a completely different way to experience an event. Now you're not collecting contacts, you're making connections. Here's another calibration. When you talk to someone, do they feel bigger afterwards or smaller? That's a hard question because sometimes we think leadership means demonstrating how much we know, correcting people, winning, showing expertise. But some of the best leaders I've ever met do something completely different. They make you feel interesting. They ask you about your project. They remember what you told them last time you talked. They tell another person what you're doing. They make you think, maybe this idea could really work. Maybe it would be really cool. And you walk away with more energy than before. So that's the best type of leadership because you just didn't communicate information. You increased another person's belief in what was possible. Imagine if that became one of the defining points of the liberty movement. People leaving our events thinking, I should build that. I should start that project. I met somebody who can help me. I can actually do this. Now we've created actual energy that can create that actual action. So little tips. Learn people's names, ask what they're building, listen longer than you speak, encourage before you criticize, leave people more hopeful than you found them. And then the 1 degree calibrations are just learn 1 name, make 1 introduction, send 1 thank you message, give 1 sincere compliment, ask 1 person, what are you building? Calibration 3, stop watching, start building. Spectators react to the future, creators build it. So here's something I think that the internet's done to us. It's made us incredibly well informed and incredibly good at watching. We watch podcasts, videos, politics, the news. We watch people reacting to the news, and then we watch people debating about reacting to the news. Then we watch, and somehow 3 hours has disappeared. But we know everything that's happened, but the harder question is, what did we actually create? That's a question I've become obsessed with. Because I think politics intends to turn people into spectators. Everything becomes about something else. What did Trump do? What did Congress do? What did the Supreme Court do? What did the media say? We're constantly watching other people move pieces around the board, and eventually we start believing that's where change happens. But liberty should teach the exact opposite lesson. You do not have to wait. That is one of the most exciting things about it. You can start now. You don't need Congress to start a business. You don't need a political party to organize a neighborhood dinner. You don't need permission to write a book, start a podcast, grow food, teach a skill, create art, help a neighbor. You can create value right now. The realization should change your posture towards the world. Instead of wondering, why isn't somebody fixing this? You could start asking, what could I build? Those are two completely different lives. One waits, the other creates. So that idea became central to 1 Degree. I call this person a creator. And I don't mean somebody that creates TikTok videos. A creator is someone that tries to create more value than they consume. A parent can be a creator, an entrepreneur, a teacher, a farmer, a mechanic, a writer. You can create something that leaves the world slightly better than you found it. That's a creation. And once you adopt that identity, your scoreboard changes. You stop asking, what did I get today? And you start asking, what exists because I showed up? Maybe somebody feels more encouraged. Maybe people met. Maybe a customer had a great experience. Maybe your child learned something. That's a way more exciting way to live. And I think a way more exciting way to talk about liberty. Because now liberty isn't just protection from the government. It's the space in which creation becomes possible. Look around. We're at the Midwest Peace and Liberty Festival. This is freaking awesome. I love every second of this. This is so cool. This is so real. There are people here. There are tents. There are speakers. There's food, conversation, friendships, memories being created. But at some point, none of this existed. There was no festival. There was an idea. Somebody thought, wouldn't it be cool if, and then they did something dangerous. They told that idea to someone else. Now 2 people had the idea, then 3. Somebody found the location, built the website, and invited the speakers, handled logistics. Somebody did all the boring stuff we'll never know even happened. One decision after another, 1 degree after another, and now we're standing inside somebody else's idea. Think about how incredible that is. Almost everything around you is started that way. Every business, every charity, every book, every festival. Somebody looked at something that didn't exist and decided that it should. The world changes every time somebody stops saying somebody should and starts saying I will. So there's a trap here. When I say build something, people immediately think something enormous. A national organization, 1,000-person event, $1 million company. Then the idea feels impossible. So they do nothing. Start smaller. Start much smaller. Want to create a conference? Start with a dinner. Want to build a community? Start with 5 people. Want to create media? Use your phone. Want to start an organization? Try a group chat first. Want to teach somebody? Find 1 person to mentor. Want to help entrepreneurs? Find 1 entrepreneur. We spend too much time imagining version 10. Build version 1. Version 1 might be ugly. That's fine. Version 1 might have 8 people. Great. Version 1 might fail. No problem. Now you've learned something, calibrate, try again. That's 1 degree. You're not waiting for perfect. You're moving and creating momentum. So my tips are create before you consume, start embarrassingly small, put a date on your idea, give people a simple way to help, replace someone should with I will. The date matters too. So someday kills ideas, Saturday creates them. The 1 degree calibrations, trade 1 hour of scrolling for building. Write 1 idea down that you've delayed doing. Take 1 first step today. Help 1 other creator move forward. Ask, did I create more value than I consumed today? Imagine yourself asking that last question to yourself every night. Not, was I productive enough or did I win? Just, did I create more value than I consumed? That's a life calibration. So number 4 is build something people want to belong to. All right, so build something people want to belong to. People may discover a movement because of the ideas, but they stay because they found their people. Here's something that shouldn't be possible. A person can attend a big conference, spend an entire weekend there, surrounded by hundreds of people who share their beliefs, and still feel still leave feeling completely alone. So think about that. People in the same building, same idea, same cause, no connections. It's because proximity isn't community. Community begins when somebody else notices that you're missing. That's a very different standard. And I think people may be one of the most, I think belonging may be one of the most powerful forces we have. Think about your favorite. It might be this festival, might be another conference, might be your church. Maybe it's something completely unrelated to politics. Why do people keep going back? It's because the content matters, but eventually it's the people. You know who's going to be there. You have traditions, inside jokes, favorite food, people you only see a few times a year. Maybe somebody saves you a seat. Maybe your kids have friends there. The event becomes part of your life. That's when something changes. You stop thinking, I'm attending their event, and you start thinking, I'm going back. Back. That's a powerful word, because now you feel like that place is yours. So what if we became unbelievably good at this? Not recruiting, but belonging. Imagine someone discovers a local Liberty community. They show up for ideas, but then someone learns their name. Someone invites them to dinner. Somebody introduces their spouse. Their kids find someone to play with. They mention wanting to start a business, and somebody says, oh, you got to meet David over here. And months later, they miss an event, and someone calls them and says, hey, we missed you. Everything good with you? Think about how that feels. They were noticed. That's community. And here's the really powerful part. You didn't have to convince them to come back because they want to now. Because people return to places where they feel seen. I think this is especially important for Liberty groups. If every interaction revolves around politics, we're building a political network, not necessarily a community. People have lives. They have families, they have kids, they have businesses, birthdays, weddings, projects, problems, dreams, wins, losses. Celebrate those too. Have cookouts, campfires, game nights, family days. Help someone with a project. Bring dinner when someone has a baby. Celebrate when somebody publishes a book. Go see their favorite band. Support a local artist. Attend the fundraiser. The movement becomes so much stronger when people would still want to spend time together, even if nobody mentions politics. This is the test. This is another huge one. While we're talking about belonging, here's one of the easiest ways to show respect. End things on time. If you say 8, end at 8. I don't care how important Amendment 7 to the committee report is. Wrap it up. Freedom does not require 3-hour committee meetings. People have families, jobs, lives. Respecting someone's time tells them your life outside this organization matters too. That's healthy, and healthy communities last. I'm going to skip ahead here. All right, calibration 5. Give people stories worth repeating. Facts explain what you believe. Stories make people care. Think about the last incredible event you attended. When you got home, what did you tell people? Probably not, the third speaker made an excellent point on slide 17. You told a story. You won't believe what happened. I met this incredible person. You should have seen this. This is how human beings communicate things that matter to us. We tell stories. We've been doing it forever. Before podcasts, stories. Before television, stories. Before social media, stories. Stories were passed around campfires and kitchen tables, passed from families, from parents to children. Stories about culture, stories carried culture long before we built institutions to carry it for us. And sometimes I think movements forget that. Trying to be respectful of your time here, make my points here. All right, calibration 6. Be unexpected. If people know what you're going to do, eventually they stop looking. Here's one enormous advantage the Liberty movement has that I don't think that we use nearly enough. We're weird. And I mean that affectionately. Look around. We've got crypto people, homesteaders, veterans, farmers, hackers, podcasters, Christians, atheists, anarchists, constitutionalists, entrepreneurs, people living off the grid, people building technology I don't understand at all. And somehow we're all camping together in Michigan. That's really incredible. Why would we ever make that boring? We should be one of the most interesting movements in America. We have people questioning assumptions about almost every part of life: money, education, technology, food, government, community, war, privacy, businesses, housing, healthcare. And sometimes we take all of that beautiful weirdness and we put it behind a folding table with brochures. We can do better than that. There's something incredible about being unexpected. It creates curiosity. First time someone hears about, "Are you smarter than a politician?" my game show, there's usually a little pause. What is that? That's exactly what I want, because now they asked. I didn't have to convince them to listen. Curiosity opened the door. That's incredibly valuable. And I think we spend way too much time trying to push information through closed doors instead of creating something interesting enough that people open the door for themselves. Sometimes the first goal isn't persuasion, it's, wait, what? Now you have their attention, and attention is the beginning of communication. Calibration number 7 is make freedom visible. The strongest argument for liberty should be what happens when liberty-minded people show up. Most Americans are never coming to a liberty conference. They're probably not going to read the books that we read. They're probably not listening to 3 hours about ending the Fed. They're definitely not reading the comment section on the YouTube video about ending the Fed. Good for them. I know that voice. So here's the question. Where are they going to encounter liberty? For most people, the answer is us. A neighbor, a coworker, a business owner, a family member, a friend, someone they know. That means every interaction that we have creates evidence. What happens when we show up? Does the room get better? Does the neighborhood get stronger? Does somebody get helped? Does a problem get solved? Does someone feel more hopeful? Because if our philosophy says voluntary cooperation works, our lives should probably provide some evidence to that effect. I think one of the strongest reputations a movement could build is incredibly simple. Those people are useful. Think about that. Call them. They'll know somebody. Ask them. They'll help. Talk to them about your business. They'll support it. Talk to her. She knows how to do that. That's influence built through value, and it doesn't require winning an election. Nobody can stop you from being useful. You can start today. Learn skills, build relationships, know people, connect resources, show up, become the person that solves things. That makes liberty visible. Okay. So, in closing, I want to leave you with one idea. Not 10, just one. Elevate the room. Every room has a temperature. Every community has a temperature. Every organization, every family, every business, every movement. And every time you walk into one, you change it. You bring something with you. You bring hope, or you bring cynicism. You bring energy, or you bring exhaustion. You bring curiosity, or you bring certainty. Generosity or selfishness. Creation or complaint. You may only change the room 1 degree, but change it anyways. So tomorrow when you walk into breakfast, elevate the room. When you go home to your family, elevate the room. When you go back to work, elevate the room. When you walk into church, elevate the room. When somebody is struggling, elevate the room. When everyone around you is complaining about what somebody else should do, build something, elevate the room. You don't have to fix America tomorrow. You don't have to fix Washington. You don't have to change the entire liberty movement. That's overwhelming. Start smaller. Start with the room you're already standing in. One conversation, one introduction, one act of generosity, one person welcomed, one creator encouraged, one business supported, one story told, one problem solved, one weird idea attempted, one project started, one person who feels bigger just because you believed in them, one thing that exists tomorrow because today you stopped saying someone should and said I will. That's 1 degree, small calibrations. extraordinary consequences. And here's what excites me the most. Imagine if it wasn't just you. Imagine if everyone at this festival went home and did it. Then everyone they inspired did it. One person becomes 10, 10 becomes 100. Different people, different projects, different communities. No central plan, no permission, just people creating more value than they consume, helping others, building, connecting, experimenting, failing, calibrating, trying again, elevating people, elevating causes, elevating communities, elevating every room they enter. So, skipped. So that's how movements grow. That's how communities change. That's how cultures change. That's what I call a freedom renaissance. We need that to begin. Not someday, not after the next election, not when Washington finally gets his act together. Here, right now, with us, with whatever we're willing to build next, one person, one project, one degree at a time. So when you leave here, don't try to change the world. Elevate the room, then elevate the next one, then the next one, until eventually the world around you is somewhere completely different. Thank you so much.
Let's hear it for free. All right. And honestly, absolutely agree with that sentiment. That was very well done, sir. And I like to think that we do, well, I like to think this event is a little bit of a part of that type of thing. You may have noticed that when you come here, everybody's nice. Everybody's happy. And boy, when you go home, it fucking sucks, right? But at least for a little bit. But you can take some of this excitement that you get here and you can bring it back with you out into the world. So ride that wave, but definitely enjoy it while you're here. And one thing you can certainly enjoy is Mr. Chad Elliott over there making some delicious sandwiches. The man knows his way around the kitchen. He's got some very, very good food. So if you're feeling hungry and you don't feel like setting up your camp kitchen, dealing with all that and washing dishes and blah, 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 sandwiches right there. So do it up. Now, that being said, we have our next speaker coming to us all the way from Florida. This is, well, actually, it's a bit unusual in the Liberty community because most of us are like total heathens, but we have a Catholic libertarian. She's a Catholic activist. This is Amity, who's going to be talking to us about pro-life absolutism. So, Amity, come on up.
Thank you. Yes. Good? Yeah. Might come here. Do I have to get closer? Okay, so good. Okay. Like he said, my name's Amity Dolby. I am a Catholic libertarian activist. And let's be honest, we label people. We look at programs and see pro-life. What is that doing here? But stick with me because you may be surprised. I'm philosophically an anarchist. Better? Okay. I will stand right here. Today I want to share my thoughts with you on what I call the consistent defense of human life and human dignity. Most people think libertarianism starts with economics, and I don't. I think it begins with a moral question. When, if ever, is it legitimate to initiate force against another peaceful human being? Many of us here have similar answers to that question. We reject political authority. We reject centralized question. We reject the idea that governments become moral simply because they wear a uniform or pass legislation. For most of my life, I was politically homeless. I was raised by conservative, great, wonderful Christian parents. They loved babies, including the unborn. They loved freedom. They loved America. But after church on Sunday, they would cheer when bombs dropped on Monday. And that never quite sat right with me. Something didn't fit. Eventually, I realized that our principles should remain consistent, even when human life becomes politically inconvenient. History teaches us that something is deeply disturbing. The greatest threat to innocent life has often been the institutions that are supposed to protect it. How do we protect life without empowering the state to wage endless wars? I'm the mom of a Marine Corps veteran. It really pisses me off that our recruiters will tantalize teenagers with, these high expectations of traveling the world, of free education, of protecting our freedoms. And it equally pisses me off when politicians send our sons and daughters, not theirs, to die in these wars that only enrich the military-industrial complex and their own pockets. U.S. post-9/11 wars have resulted in millions of deaths. We're talking about our service members. We're talking about foreign military, a lot of them conscripted to fight in wars that they don't even believe in the causes. I got a bee sting. We're talking about innocent women and children. These are Christians, they're Muslims, they're people with no faith, they're people with other faiths, and they're just living their lives until the bombs start dropping. Instead of focusing, though, on what we can't fix in DC, I think we should just withdraw our cooperation and consent from those institutions that profit from war. Now, consistency has a way of asking uncomfortable questions. If we're going to reject aggression, how far are we willing to take that principle? I know people in this room probably disagree with me about when rights begin, and that's okay. What interests me is a different question. How do we protect life without empowering the state to criminalize women that feel abortion might be their only option? I would say it's strong families, it's mutual aid, it's economic freedom, it's churches, it's community, it's adoption, it's charity. Konkin argued that every peaceful voluntary exchange weakens dependence on coercive institutions. Counter-economics isn't simply about avoiding the state. It's about proving that peaceful people can solve problems better than political institutions can. Every successful voluntary institution weakens the argument that government intervention is necessary. Every church or crisis pregnancy center that helps a struggling woman, including myself when I was a very young, single, scared, unwed, expecting mother. Every family that adopts, every neighborhood that feeds the hungry, every mutual aid network, every homeschool co-op, every community that solves a problem voluntarily becomes proof that liberty works. Now, if we're serious about saying that human life possesses inherent dignity, that principle can't stop at our prison gates either. So how do we pursue justice when without creating a punitive state? One of the greatest dangers in our country in the political climate is believing that once someone commits a crime, they somehow lose their humanity. They may lose certain freedoms. They may owe restitution. They may need to be separated from society. They may need to withdraw from the freedoms that we enjoy, but they never stop being human beings. Too often, our criminal justice system is built around punishment rather than restoration. Accountability and vengeance are not the same thing. Government has an unfortunate habit of expanding criminal law until nearly everyone, including everyone here, is guilty of something, some law that government creates. Government is not the arbiter of what is good and what is evil. These are licensing violations. They're regulatory violations. They're possession of a plant. In other words, society has confused disobedience with government with actual evil. The question we should be asking is, did someone harm another person? If not, why are we putting them in cages? That also changes how we think about addiction. Drug addiction is tragic. It destroys families. It destroys lives. But it's not a criminal issue. Many people who struggle with addiction should be seeking medical help before they see a police officer put them in handcuffs. A society that values life should seek restoration whenever possible. Justice should protect victims, but it should require restitution when appropriate. It should never forget that even offenders possess inherent human dignity. So how do we address capital punishment when the crimes are especially heinous? Capital punishment cannot be trusted to a government when more humane avenues are available to protect society from dangerous individuals. Why don't I trust the government with capital punishment? Because the state gets it wrong way too much. One example is my home state of Florida. In the last 50 years, 24% of people on death row have been exonerated. So then you ask, of the other 74%, how many of them are really innocent? It really makes you think. You know, they could be guilty of prosecutorial misconduct, mistaken identity. We just don't know. Some are guilty, but believe it or not, it even cost us less in taxes to house someone for life than to kill them on death row, contrary to what people may think. So I think society can still be protected without granting government the irreversible power of deciding who lives and who dies. So once we accept that every prisoner remains a human being with inherent dignity, another difficult question naturally follows. What about the person who crossed an invisible political boundary looking for a better life? Immigration has become one of the most emotionally charged issues in America today. But before it's a political issue, it's a human issue. Every immigrant is someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's mom, someone's brother, someone's sister, someone's dad. I realize that nations have boundary lines. Every nation is tasked with stopping violent criminals, but somewhere along the way, we've begun treating peaceful people as though they were our enemies. A country can have borders without abandoning compassion. Many undocumented immigrants have lived here for years. They work, they raise children, they attend church, they start businesses. They're our neighbors, they're our friends. Many have never committed a violent crime. As a matter of fact, most have never committed a violent crime. Yet they're often spoken about as if their very existence is criminal. A consistent defense of human life and human dignity and human liberty rejects that way of thinking. Being born on the other side of a political boundary doesn't reduce someone's worth. Government classifications don't determine human dignity. God already did. That also means we should reject unnecessary cruelty by a militarized federal police force. Children shouldn't be traumatized. Families should not be torn apart. Peaceful people shouldn't live in constant fear simply because they were born somewhere else. Political borders shouldn't become excuses for treating peaceful people as enemies. Communities should retain the freedom to associate or not associate voluntarily. The state should not manufacture hostility where none exists. So one final attribute of the consistent defense of human life and human liberty that I want to talk about is euthanasia. How do we care for the dying without giving government authority over death? The hardest thing I've ever done was not stand up here and give you guys a talk. It was caring for my elderly parents. In 2016, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and just a few months later, my dad was diagnosed with colon cancer. He was her primary caregiver as she was losing her memory. And they decided that they would move in with me so that I could help care for both of them while my dad went through chemotherapy. It was a grueling year and a half, and I watched my dad peacefully die in a hospital bed in my living room. No one dictated to us how his treatment should be had, when he should die, when it was no longer working. It was up to him and up to us to decide. My mom's still doing great. She stayed with me for 8 more years, and now she lives with my sister after giving me a break. It was a long 8 years, but it was very rewarding for both of us. But having served as a caretaker for my elderly parents, I believe in compassionately helping our loved ones experience a natural death with dignity, without the state steering or influencing that choice. Euthanasia is actually becoming normalized in Europe, in Canada, in other places around the world, and increasingly it's part of the national conversation here in the United States. Michigan lawmakers are currently debating a law called Death with Dignity Act to legalize physician-assisted suicide. While it protects physicians from criminal liability, involving lawmakers in end-of-life decisions opens the door to potential government overreach. We've seen this around the world. As government involvement in healthcare grows, there's a risk of subtle or direct coercion, especially for the elderly, the disabled, or the financially vulnerable. Simply stated, medical decisions should remain between a patient, their loved ones, and their doctor. Whenever government becomes involved in end-of-life decisions, incentives inevitably shift. Government counts the cost, families count love. So all these tenets, abortion, war, criminal justice, capital punishment, immigration, euthanasia, they encompass my broader philosophy on defending life, which is protecting the most vulnerable among us. Governments organize society through force. Agorists and anarchists believe civilization grows through voluntary competition and cooperation. That's why I believe consistently defending life is bigger than politics. Every meal shared is voluntary, every family strengthened, every peaceful exchange, every act of charity, every adoption, every neighbor helping another, every conflict resolved without violence, every institution built outside the state becomes another argument for liberty. The non-aggression principle isn't simply about refusing to initiate force. It's about building institutions that make force unnecessary. Our first instinct should always be the same. How do free people solve issues without creating more coercion? That's the question I hope we keep asking, because liberty isn't just the absence of force, it's the presence of people willing to care for one another without being compelled. Thank you very much.
Man, we need to figure out a way to do that quieter. All right, who's having a good time so far? All right. It is my pleasure. First, we're going to undo that cord. Sorry. It is my pleasure to get up here and introduce to you our next speaker, who was one of the people I was the most excited to have here at Festival this year. He is the one that has graciously supplied us with the pig that we will be eating tomorrow, but he is also one of the best examples of standing up for your rights and your freedoms and living your actual values that I have gotten to hear about so far. So give it up for Mr. Mark Baker.
That's good enough. That's good enough. You hear me all right? Don't usually show up in gym shorts, but well, I am the guy that invested in the cows and the land and all that stuff. I am that guy. So, but back when I did that, I had no idea any of this was going to happen. So, we're the B team. Somebody else was supposed to do this pig for y'all, but she couldn't make it. So that's why I'm here. Yeah. So we showed up yesterday with a live pig in our trailer. My wife Jill and I, she was sitting next to me over there. And this morning we shot that pig and prepared it for your barbecue tomorrow. So I am that farmer guy. I didn't really have anything prepared, but I'm really into liberty and peace. In my life, peace has been a choice. So I was in the military. I was in for 20 years, and I don't recommend that if you want peace. That you're not going to find it there. And when I retired, Jill and I decided that we did not want to go and be involved with contracting, and there was some hot wars going on at the time, a lot of money involved. But we decided we didn't want to do that. And so we bought a farm in northern Michigan. And my parents thought that we were out of our minds. So did hers. But that's what we did. And 22 years later, we've got a pretty successful operation, very diversified. We milk cows. We milk about 10 to 14 cows. We raise steers, so the offspring of the cows are the steer. If they're bulls, we castrate them, and that's our beef operation. We have a full service butcher shop on our farm. We have a store on our farm. All of our kids have worked for us, and I've got 8 of them. And it's pretty successful. It's operating right now as we speak. I'm here and Jill's here, but my 2 youngest boys are running the show while we're home. And when I first came out of the military, I wasn't really sure how you operate something like that as far as the freedom goes to do it. It took time to get to the place where we are right now. But I operate with total impunity from any regulators or anyone like that in the state. So for what I do, which is farming, that I'm completely dedicated to it, I don't do anything else because I want peace. I have the freedom to do kind of what we did this morning. We just hauled a live animal in here, took a rifle and shot it, and then prepared it for you all to eat. I was free to do that. I didn't ask permission. I didn't have to get a permit. None of that stuff. Yeah. And I think that a liberty to some degree, not in every case, but in some cases, in my life anyway, it was a choice. I mean, I could have asked the county health department, is it okay with you guys if I come to this campground and shoot a pig with a rifle? They would say no, of course. No one's going to say yes to something like that. You just have to do it. And if I've done something that offends the health department, okay, your move. Do what you want. What are they going to do? Nothing. They don't have any options. But so long as I don't ask them, I'm okay. Now, I'm not advocating breaking the law. I'm not advocating that. But any of these PIPET organizations like Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources, County Health Department, County Planning Commissions, I never ask them before I do something. And if you don't ask them, they certainly don't come and confront me at this stage of the game. So, I'm sorry, I forgot your name already. David. Sorry, David. David said something about standing up for my rights. And I'll just briefly go into that because what I'm talking about, I know what I'm talking about because we did lock horns with the state about 10 years ago. And you may, if you're in the state, you may have heard about it. But Department of Agriculture decided that we had a feral swine problem. And they came out with a list of characteristics, and if your pigs had any of those characteristics, you had to get rid of them. And they said, because we say so. And I was newly out of the military, and I think I was still half on the fight at the time. And I just didn't like their attitude. They appeared to be really unprofessional to me. And so I said, I'm not doing it. I just won't do it. So it wound up being about a 3.5 year long lawsuit. And at the end of it, Baker's Green Acres prevailed because we just dug our heels in. They offered us a whole bunch of ways out, you know, like to respectfully bow out of the struggle. But I just got, no, I'm not. If you want to come and take my animals, do it. And we'll see where that goes. And I didn't really know where it would go. And there was all kinds of people that came into my life that tried to influence me one way or the other, lawyers, everything. But I just held my ground, and I said, no, I'm keeping my animals. So in the course of my military career, I had to take an oath to protect and defend a document. That document is the U.S. Constitution. I had to take that oath 5 times. And my oath is, I will protect and defend this document from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Now, I didn't really connect the dots back then in the pig days, but the reality is the Fifth Amendment says that my life, liberty, and property is protected under the due process of law, right? So where does a state agency get off saying you can't have it anymore because we friggin' say so? It doesn't compute. And I held my ground, and I was right. I was right. Now you can extrapolate that to any situation. The state of Michigan says no raw milk. So what have I done? That was 10 years ago, and I've kind of hit the press the test button continually since then. They say you can't sell raw milk. So what did I do? I'm selling raw milk. And here's the reality of raw milk. A cow gives you about 4 gallons of milk a day. You sell milk for about $10 a gallon. Times 10, if you milk 10 cows, do the math. You know, you want to farm? Do something that pays. If you farm and you're doing something that doesn't pay, you won't be farming very long. But milking cows pays. We milk about 10 cows, about 40 gallons of milk a day, times 10, so about $400 a day. In our economy, it's great. It's great. We're doing really well. But we live pretty close to the earth. We don't, I believe I'm kind of a minimalist type guy, having been in the military all the time. The other thing I wanted to say to you guys, because this morning before we killed this pig, we had a lot of conversation with some of your people up there under the old oak tree there where we strung up Junior. And I realized from a lot of the rhetoric that I was hearing from, or the responses that I was hearing from you all, just a little constructive criticism, but you have nothing to fear except fear itself. You're afraid that somebody's going to take your liberty. And I don't see it. I know that there's isolated cases, but I live in a place where the Republicans and the Democrats fight each other like schoolgirls, school people, let's say. And we operate with impunity right down the middle. They don't have any time for us because I never buy into their game. I did. I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh. Thought it'd be cool if Trump got elected. It was for a while. It was fun to watch some of my lib friends just shrivel. That was kind of fun for a while. It's not so much fun anymore. They can't. It's just not fun anymore. But for me, if I want life and liberty, peace and liberty, I have made the choice to do that. I don't think if we had a libertarian, I got nothing against the Libertarian Party, don't get me wrong, but I don't think if we had a libertarian governor, all of a sudden, the state bureaucratic agencies would fall right in line with you. they'd fight you tooth and nail. They're not going to do what you say, and they're still going to abuse citizens. The only way that the bureaucrat parasite class backs off and respects you is when you take their scalps, a few of them, and you can't. And I can spend a lot of time on this, but I'll just, real quick, I'm just going to talk to you about a concept. And I didn't really know I was going to go here. Didn't know I'd be standing up in bare feet here either. But a concept of degradation of constitutional rights under the color of law. You should hear that and listen to it. You should memorize that. Because what officials do a lot of times is they infer that you need to veer off from your constitutional rights. And they will do that under the color of law. Let's say you have somebody like a township supervisor. I love to pick on them because they're really abusive. And they tell you, well, you know, we don't think it's fair that you have a rooster in your yard. And so you're going to need to dispossess that rooster. If that happened to me, I would be, gotcha, right then. Because what is a rooster? Property. Protected under what? Due process of law. Words have meanings, right? Due process of county ordinance? No. Due process of law. Does ordinance supersede a law? What happens if you blatantly blow off an ordinance? State police get you? No. Does anybody get you? No. They threaten you with getting you. Fear of fear. Fear of fear. So when I say that we need to take a few scalps from these people, I'm talking about summoning them to a contract court or a civil court, right? Every county employee is required to take what? An oath. The oath is what? The contract. And they do have immunity so long as what? They stay within the bounds of that contract. Step outside of it, gotcha. Can't have a rooster. I gotcha. Now, in my case, what is the Constitution worth? Okay, we take it to a court, a civil court. Judge hears it. Mr. Baker, what do you think you're owed by this man that tried to tell you can't have a rooster? I'm not sure I'd say this, but I'll say it to you. I'd like to say, I want him scalped right now. And the judge might say, well, what makes you think that your constitutional rights are that vital that we should scalp him right now? I say, Judge, I lost people in my life, in my career, and they were defending this document. They defended it for you. Yeah, I think you should be scalped. You might get the judge to go along with you. But the critical part of that is when Junior gets a letter in the mail saying that he's being sued. And then he goes to who? The county attorney. The county attorney says, pal, you're being sued individually. You better get a lawyer. That's the pain that you can inflict. And every one of you in here could do that. So when these people think that they have immunity or you can't get at them, that's incorrect. You can't get at them. And you can do it very simply. Every time we've given this advice and a citizen has followed through with it, it worked. The problem is most citizens are afraid because they've been coaxed into being afraid. You know, I'm up there killing a pig this morning. And somebody said, well, what are you going to do if they pull in? Like, who pull in? Who's going to pull in? And what would I do? I might squirt them with the hose or something. I wouldn't stop what I'm doing. There's no way. I have a constitutional right per the Fifth Amendment to my process, which in this case is killing a pig and preparing it for you guys. So I have a train of thought that was developed during the pig struggle, that we call it, and it's solid. it's solid, and I think it would be of help to you all, liberty-minded folks, because if you understand it, your fear diminishes. Like, I remember one time when I was stationed in Maine, and all the guys in my shop were all about bear hunting. Bear hunting. A lot of bears out there. And they would put bait out on the ground, and then they climb up in a tree in a stand and wait for a bear to come in. And it sounded, that sounds like a good idea to me. I think I'll do that. First time I got in a tree, I was experiencing fear. Because I'd never shot even a deer. I shot a squirrel, I think, at that point. And I thought, if the bear waltzes in here, I was afraid. But as time went by, and some of my friends shot bear, I was hungry. I wanted a bear to come in. I'd start envisioning it. I'd start hearing that bear coming in. And that's how I've become with the stinking parasite class. I hunt them. I mean, I look for them, and I wait for them to infringe on my constitutional rights. And if I get them in where I would put them, there would be no quarter. Absolutely none. Because what they did to me, right, just bureaucrats, they said I had to dispossess my animals. That's their lingo that they like to use. They said that they would arrest me in front of my children, they said, me and my wife in front of my children, which means they're going to take my children if they arrest me. And they said they were going to, oh, so that's my liberty, right? They were going to take my liberty. And then they were going to take my property, my farm, unless I did what they told me to do. So you think I'm going to give them an inch of grace when it's turned around the other way? Absolutely not. And nobody else should either. They're not your friends. They're not your friends. They work for a different team. And that team has nothing to do with liberty and justice for all. Has nothing to do with creating wealth at all. All they do is suck wealth. And is it helping? I mean, are they helping society? No, they're not. So that's why I label them and I needle them every time I get a chance. So you can forward this to your best parasite bureaucrat friend. I don't care what agency they work for, because they're not my friends. So that's it. That's what I wanted to tell you. I wasn't sure if that was going to be it, but is there a question for me that I can talk to you about? Marion, Michigan, up by Cadillac. Jill and I have owned it for 22 years. We bought it when I got out of the military. Yeah, we sell beef. We have a store, our own store, unlicensed, unapproved. Just, we have refrigerators in there, and when we kill beef, we load the freezers, and the store acts as a place where a lot of our customers are mothers. So they are on the hunt right now. People in the know that the food at the store could not be quite up to snuff. I think everybody's agreed on that. And so they want to get it off the farm. And so we, like our beef, we just feed them grass. In the wintertime, they get hay, which is grass, basically. And when we kill the beef, we process it, and it goes in our store and is sold out of there with milk and other things like that. Pork. That pig that we killed this morning was born on our farm, and that was his very first trailer ride. Yeah, we do a lot of slaughtering on the farm. And most of the animals, except for the chickens, are born there. So they have a nice life till the last day. Any other questions? Yeah. No, when my struggle was not with the county, it was with the state government. And back then, we were pretty wore out after the 3 years because there was so much unknown. there was a lot of fear. You know, you got people high up in the government, and they're saying this could happen to you. And then you have people, yeah, you have people that you know of, celebrity type people that will say, "Ooh, this doesn't look good." You know some of these people, Michigan people, right? And so you get scared. And when the whole thing was over and we prevailed, the state moved for a dismissal, which basically says, okay, we don't want to fight anymore. We know we messed with you for 3 years, messed with your family, messed with your finances, destroyed your customer base, but we don't want to fight anymore. So we're just going to go. That's what they did. Judge went along with it. Lawyers went along with it. And we felt like, how does this seem right? But yeah. Well, there were people that helped me out because there was a lot of equity on the table. If the state of Michigan, Department of Agriculture, no less. I hope there's none of you here, but if there are, that's too bad. I don't care. But they are the retards of the departments. They're the people that have no other place to go because, like, cops won't have them, lawyers won't have them, so they wound up at the Department of Ag. And then they're told, you're going to be a food inspector. So they were the ones that headed this up. And when it was over and they moved for a dismissal, we wanted our lawyer to sue them. She wouldn't do it. So if you don't know by now, the lawyers and the machine, the lawyers work for the machine. So they got to play by their rules, the corporation's rules. If you're going to go into a court, you got to be willing to represent yourself, and you got to have that document to do it. And you got to have a camera in there too, because the lawyers, judges, there are some good ones, but in our case, the only reason that the judge went with us was because there was too many witnesses. Too many witnesses. Yeah. Well, if it was a closed door proceeding, he could have just said, yeah, the state's right. You got to get rid of your pigs. We don't give a damn. Yeah. But people were fired up about it because the ruling that they put out, the Department of Agriculture put out, it stated in that, and this is what started the whole firestorm in the first place, it stated that any non-native species in the state of Michigan is subject to the invasive species order. So I don't know what is in the state of Michigan that was here like when the Pilgrims landed. I don't. Brown trout, I don't think so. Black and white cows, no. So they were giving themselves a blanket to supersede the Fourth Amendment when it came to farming operations. They could go on any farm, anytime. If they want to come on my farm right now, what do they need? An invitation or a warrant? What does a warrant require? Criminal activity. Am I doing anything criminal? Should a judge ever issue a warrant to them? No. But if they do, they're not above the law either. They can be hauled into a civil court. Their own court. It's true. It's true. Any other questions? It's been a long sit. And I got a sandwich waiting for me. There you go. There you go. That is a valid facet of this conversation. It really is. And it's a long conversation. Like, we have the republic and then we have the corporation, right? Now, I'm optimistic and I'm not sure how good the corporation is doing right now. I'm not sure. I've heard things. We'll see. I think there's people who are sick and tired of the corporation. We'll see. And there's some very dangerous people out there when it comes to the republic. Very dangerous. Because I don't think that this is just an email war. It's gone beyond that. But we will see. I know I'm not part of it. I'm dedicated to my farm. And I already did my service to my country. No shooting for me. Anything else? Okay, it's a pleasure to serve.
Thank you. You're welcome. All right. Yeah, give it up for Mark again. We're happy to have you here, sir. Enjoy that sandwich. I will again shout out that we have fresh sandwiches coming at you from Chad's Bistro under the pavilion. If you guys are hungry, I know I did not bring enough food, nor do I want to actually cook over a fire right now. So sandwiches are the best. Before I get started, I just want to get a sense of the room here. I'm curious, how many people here consider themselves to be anarchists? Is that as basically most of it? Okay. And how many of you guys either grew up in or are now part of a church? Also, most of us. All right. I'm curious, who thinks that a church generally does a better job of changing hearts and minds than we do here in the Liberty Movement? So before anybody gets the wrong idea, I'm not claiming that every church is a finely tuned outreach machine. Plenty of them are a disaster, for sure. No, definitely not. And not every Christian has the principles I'm about to talk about down. And some of what gets called evangelical today is, in my opinion, just using the cross as a marketing logo. But what I'm talking about today is the subset that actually managed to grow, retain members, and change hearts and minds. Every single Liberty event or organizational meeting I go to, the same collection of frustrations come up like clockwork. We launch things ready, fire, aim, no logo, no website, no plan, just a social media announcement and pure vibes. The factionalism and purity tests keep capable people on the sidelines because they failed a 47-point litmus test. It's the familiar NAP definition gotcha hypothetical where, if someone's expected to explain precisely what happens if a privately owned vehicle is transporting a death laser across a disputed toll bridge and one very unlucky pedestrian is refusing to move. And the brand new volunteers that do show up, bright-eyed and ready to help, they either get completely ignored or, even worse, they get handed a title, a Google Drive of unfinished projects from 2019, and a nice, "You're the new outreach director. Congratulations. Have fun." And the leadership that turns over so quickly that whatever institutional knowledge those people are able to scrape together usually walks out the door with them, typically still arguing about bylaws along the way out. And under all of this is a constant background noise of armchair strategists and professional naysayers who have a detailed 12-point plan of exactly what we should be doing, and about as much of a plan to or interest in doing it as I have in serving on the platform committee. Does that sound about right? I'm sure I missed about a dozen things here, but I feel like I've got the vibe down. Now, this sounds like a lot of problems. Some seem like failures of outreach. Others seem to come from volunteer management or internal culture or leadership, or the fact that apparently nobody in the organization owns the password to the MailChimp account. But I don't think that they're separate problems. I think they're symptoms of the same underlying state. The churches that manage these things well do not simply work harder than we do. They organize the work differently. Reaching somebody for the first time, helping that person grow, and preparing some people to eventually carry responsibility are treated as three genuinely different roles. And that makes sense when you think about it. Someone who hears our ideas for the first time is in a fundamentally different place from someone who spent 5 years wrestling with them. They're not asking the same questions, carrying the same assumptions, or facing the same obstacles. One may be still trying to determine whether libertarians are people who want legal heroin vending machines in elementary schools, while the other may be trying to reconcile two competing theories of property acquisition written by men who have been dead for a century. There is no reason that the same approach or tactics would work equally for both of them. So for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to divide them into three categories: outreach, growth, and development. And I think this one distinction explains far more than we realize.
It explains why much of our outreach feels ineffective, why volunteers disappear, and why organizations lose momentum whenever leadership changes. Sometimes. All right. Let's start with the front door, because I think we've been asking outreach to do a job it was never meant to do. One of the things I really appreciate about the people here this weekend is that very few of us are actually content to just sit around and complain. People here have tabled at county fairs in 90-degree heat, hosted meetups where 5 people showed up, and then they hosted another one anyway. They've knocked doors, made videos, and explained the Federal Reserve to relatives at Thanksgiving who are just trying to eat some mashed potatoes. The effort is real. I don't think laziness is our central problem. I think we've assigned outreach the wrong job. So we're judging it by the wrong standards. We ask, did this person become a libertarian? When the better first question is, do they want to come back? Those are completely different assignments. Think about the first time somebody walks into a church. Nobody meets them in the parking lot and says, before you come inside, we need to establish the definition or your position on infant baptism, predestination, and the precise sequence of events surrounding the end times. That isn't because Christians don't think those are important questions. Some care about them enough to split entire denominations over the placement of a comma. They just know that the parking lot is the wrong place to settle that. Instead, somebody asks your name, offers some coffee, points you towards the donuts. They're allowed to sit in the back, take everything in, and be a guest before anyone asks them to become something else. And we have a habit of reversing that. Somebody expresses the slightest curiosity about liberty, and then 10 minutes later, they're defending themselves against every edge case we've collected since Murray Rothbard was in short pants. What about roads? What about courts? What about nuclear weapons? What if Amazon buys the moon? Good outreach makes it easier to take the first step. Sometimes that really is as simple as having food at your functions. Cynics will say that of course people show up if there's free food. Yes, exactly. This is not some breakthrough in human psychology. If somebody hands you a plate and asks you about your week before you've done anything for them, they've already communicated to you that you matter. The same thing is true of logistics. If a parent can't participate because their 6-year-old has about 11 minutes of adult interaction before the folding chairs become an obstacle course, that isn't an ideological problem. Give the kids something to do. A mission nobody can practically attend is not especially well designed. You can also lower the social friction risk. Let people listen without signing anything, announcing a label, or being called on to defend a position. A Liberty event doesn't need to become a church picnic with a crockpot committee, but it could maintain something for a normal person to do besides sit through a business meeting. It's a very narrow hobby. Not even most libertarians enjoy business meetings, and yet there were people online commenting on our stuff saying that this is not what we should be doing this weekend, and instead this should be an organizational meeting. Then they're crazy people. All of this answers a question nobody's asked out loud. Have these people built something that I would actually want to join? Robert Coleman wrote that people are looking for a demonstration, not just an explanation. And John 13:35 makes the same point, that people will recognize Christ's disciples by how they love one another. People experience our philosophy before they understand it. Long before somebody evaluates Austrian economics or our theory of property rights, they're deciding whether we're generous, reliable, and worth spending another evening around. So live the philosophy when no one has requested a lecture about it. And tip well, preferably in cash, so it's harder to tax. Put your shopping cart away. Show up when you say you will. The other person may never read Rothbard or even learn that you're an anarchist, but they will remember that you behaved differently from the average entitled customer or unreliable acquaintance who assumes an invisible employee or someone else will handle the consequences of everything that they do. Getting the front door right subtly solves another big problem. Every movement has lazy people. Every movement has critics, and someone capable of consuming 12 hours of discussion for every 4 minutes of useful work they actually put into it. Usually the better answer is just to make them a smaller percentage of the whole. Healthy organizations don't eliminate dead weight, they just outgrow it. If 3 people are doing all the work and one of them is a professional naysayer, that person controls a third of the entire culture. If 30 constructive people are active in your party, that same personality becomes background noise. You don't have to solve every spectator. You just need a healthy enough front door so more builders can find you. Not every visitor will come back, and nobody should expect them to. The job is to create a first experience that makes the next conversation possible. Because the first conversation cannot do the rest of the work on command. Now, this is probably the most important thing I want people to take away from this talk, is that you cannot argue someone into becoming an anarchist. I think, honestly, the last 3 people that were up here kind of touched on similar things about anarchy being a philosophy, not just a set of political ideals. Arguments are still useful, and a good argument about war, taxes, or occupational licensing can absolutely change somebody's political position. People can become libertarians that way in just a few minutes. But anarchy, at least the way I'm using that word here, is deeper than a collection of policy answers. Libertarianism is the political philosophy that most closely reflects it, but anarchy is a moral shift that happens when you stop asking only whether a particular use of force is wise and start asking why one human being is entitled to initiate force against another, or hire a third party to do it, and pretend that that changed the morality of the act at question. The usual purity test makes the distinction clear. When we ask a newcomer to define the NAP, solve the roads question, and survive the privately owned nuclear submarine question, we tell ourselves we're testing whether they understand the philosophy, but most of the time we're just testing whether or not they're ready for a good debate. Somebody can learn our vocabulary or memorize the answers to the questions and still treat every person around them like absolute garbage. The real test is whether they refuse to use force, fraud, coercion, and theft when those things would be useful, profitable, or easy to outsource. If anarchy were just a set of correct answers, a sufficiently good argument really could install it in someone's brain. But a lived ethic, nobody can install that for you. The Christians understand this limitation in their own language, and it's like a core belief. A pastor can preach, teach, answer questions, and show somebody what a relationship with God looks like, but he can corner them in the fellowship hall and but he can't corner them and badger them into genuine belief. Christians would say you can't save another person, only God can. I'm making the same parallel claim here. You can't free another person, they can only free themselves. Once you've accepted that, outreach gets a lot clearer. You create the opportunity, remove unnecessary barriers, answer honestly, and make the next conversation worth having. Then the deeper work happens through time, relationships, and experience. That's growth. Growth is where these are interesting ideas start becoming, this is genuinely changing how I see the world. That takes more than another reading list. It takes relationships, repetition, trust, and somewhere meaningful to participate and learn and grow. The mistake we make here is treating every new person like the unfinished version of the same person. We say not everybody needs to become a candidate or the chair, but those are still really the only destinations we seem prepared to recognize. Everybody else is just a volunteer, which usually just means an interchangeable human being standing near a folding table, waiting for whatever task he wants. Churches don't build that way. Imagine a church composed entirely of pastors. One's preaching while the other one is trying to remember which slider controls the microphone, and the third one is checking the babies into the nursery. That would probably be a nightmare. But even if those pastors were able to adapt and overcome and keep that church functional, it would be a drastic waste of time and talent. The soundboard isn't beneath the pastor, but somebody else may simply enjoy it more, understand it better, or be far better at it. And that person isn't a failed pastor. They're the reason the pastor can be an effective pastor. I've helped bring somebody into this movement because I just needed a video editor for my podcast. That was their door. Not a debate about the Federal Reserve, not a 400-page reading list. I just needed something done, and I knew somebody that could do it. And from watching the shows and meeting some of the other people that they were involved with through the podcast, they joined the party and became an active member. And then, they're less active now. They're living their life peacefully for their own mental health, which I support. Video editing doesn't look like a movement building in the way that standing behind a podium does. But the person who turns an hour of footage into 3 minutes that people can actually watch honestly carried the message far better than most of the people of us that are on camera. That person entered through a skill, and their relationship to the people and ideas could grow alongside the work. That's what growth should make possible. Learn who people are, give them a real piece of the work with a clear finish line and enough room to make decisions. Don't hand somebody a department title because they showed up. Let them own one real task. If they love it, give them another piece and help them get better. If they hate it, move them somewhere else. Discovering that somebody never wants to touch a spreadsheet again is useful information. The system is working. Our ready, fire, aim problem usually begins here too. Imagine an event announced 9 months in advance, where 2 people have the whole project in their heads, and 5 or 6 volunteers keep asking what they can do and get told, we'll have tasks for you soon. And then 8 months later, the signs were never ordered, speakers still need travel information, and registration is collecting responses in an account nobody can access. And now everything is urgent. Those same 2 people are up until 2 o'clock in the morning for 3 weeks and do it almost all themselves, because doing it now would be faster than trying to explain it to somebody else. And afterward, they announced that nobody wanted to help. But people wanted to help. They were just handed vague ownership of nothing. Real work given early creates competence before everything becomes an emergency. It also creates sweat equity. People care more when they can point to something and say, I helped build that. But the work only builds commitment if the culture around it reflects the responsibility we're teaching. At the front door, strangers are deciding whether or not our behavior matches our claims. During growth, people are finding out whether those claims survive inside of our own community. Your treatment of your own people either validates your philosophy or it completely destroys it. Somebody gives 6 months of evenings and their weekends to a project, spends their own money, rearranges family responsibilities, and gets thanked with a list of things that they should have done better. We talk endlessly about the value of individual time and property, and then behave as though volunteer time has become collective property the moment anybody volunteers any of it. And then if we thank people like the work matter, reimburse expenses when you can, takes away some of those other frictions from their lives, and really treat it like they're valued. Okay, sorry, the whole thing just refreshed. We shouldn't volunteer somebody else's labor if they're not there. And we shouldn't let one responsibility become every adjacent job because the organization remembered at midnight that a newsletter, a website, and event photos are all basically communication stuff. So that's a communications director's job, right? I think conflict might be the easiest test of all, and another place that I'll grab an ethic from the church. In Matthew 18, it gives us a very clear cut of how to handle conflict. Go to a person privately, and if that doesn't work, bring 1 or 2 friends. If that doesn't work, then you take it to the body of the church. Our preferred order is often take it to the membership, which is Twitter, act like journalists heroically policing our own, and make sure that the entire country knows about our mistakes before the people involved have even finished making those mistakes. Whether you were upset about the Joe Jorgensen anti-racist tweet or the LP Kentucky Gold Star tweet, Neither story would have traveled like it did without libertarians publicly prosecuting other libertarians and repeating the story over and over again. We became the distribution network for our own worst moments, and then we complained about how the movement was being perceived publicly. The lesson isn't that serious mistakes should be ignored. It's that correction should be aimed at resolving the problem and helping people grow, not proving to spectators that we're the most morally superior person in the pylon. People deciding whether to stay are watching how we handle mistakes, whether we keep our word, and whether their time will be respected. Eventually, some become capable of more than completing a piece of work. They can take real responsibility for the functions itself. And that's where development comes in. By this point, the question is no longer, is this person willing to help? It's, can people safely depend on them to carry something that matters? Leadership does not mean a candidate or a chair or the person on the graphics or in front of the camera. It means owning a necessary function and protecting the people who rely on it. Leadership is not always front-facing, and not everything front-facing is leadership. But we pour most of our development energy into finding somebody willing to run for office, and then we act confused when an organization doesn't spontaneously form around them. We're developing pastors for churches that do not exist. A good campaign manager is not the candidate's glorified assistant. They make communications, field fundraising, compliance, and so many other tasks. They handle the candidate's calendar and add up to one campaign instead of 5 groups creating emergencies for each other. They decide what cannot all be done and protect the candidate's time for the work that only the candidate can do. And their names will never appear on a yard sign or even on a website, but they are still exercising more organizational leadership than any of the people who appear on all of them. The same principle exists inside other kinds of work within our movement. Communications director isn't just the person with the Canva password. They build a voice and a process that still works when the chair changes. The 6 people have suddenly 6 ideas about what we should be saying. The communications director is the person who still keeps the vision and sees it through. Development means people become excellent inside of a lane, improve it, and make somebody else more capable. It does not mean that everybody eventually becomes a manager, and a great specialist may never want to supervise anyone. And that's okay too. We don't need to shoehorn people into our own paths, into what we think that we need them to become. But once somebody is trusted with other people's time, money, private information, access, or reputation, the standard changes. This is where we finally can litmus test people. Your standards reveal whether your principles actually apply when the responsibility is on the line. The real test was never if somebody could define the NAP, like I said. It's whether people can trust them with a piece of their lives and work. Do they keep agreements? Do they tell the truth when it costs them? Do they communicate trouble before it becomes a crisis? That's what I'm still working on. Do they respect other people's autonomy when consent becomes inconvenient? That's not replacing ideology with a personality test. It's testing the ideology where it actually lives in their conduct. The standard should fit the responsibility. Somebody editing a clip does not need the same level of vetting as somebody taking control of the bank account. Now return to the event announced 9 months out. Growth gives us people who know how to handle the real pieces, and development gives us the person who can keep all those pieces into one plan. That person starts at the event date, works backwards, and they know the signs depend on final branding, and half the volunteers cannot do the jobs if registration is trapped in somebody's personal account. They assign owners, set real deadlines, and notice in month 3, not month 8, that something critical is drifting. This is the systems manager. The name may vary, but the function does not. Somebody has to see how everybody else's work connects and protect it from the failures upstream. That's leadership, even if they never give a speech or run for office. The last part is making sure that the work survives the person doing it. Otherwise, every new officer gets 6 versions of the logo across 3 different Google Drives, and the file labeled Final is somehow older than the one labeled Final Real, but newer than the one labeled Final Use This One. We don't have institutions. We have archaeological sites where every few years another group arrives with shovels and tries to figure out which civilization created which folder. Files need stable homes. Processes need to be written down. Relationships need to be transferred. And that can't happen with a 30-minute Zoom call 3 days after somebody resigns in anger. Every mature person inside every necessary function, there we go, words, should eventually be asking, who am I teaching this to next? And healthy organizations are not organizations where the right person never leaves. They're organizations capable of surviving when that person does. Man, it's hot up here. Everything in this talk comes back to 2 points. The first is that you cannot argue someone into becoming an anarchist. Arguments can open doors and change policy positions, expose contradictions, and give somebody questions that they can't stop thinking about. They can introduce the pieces, but the deeper moral shift has to become that person's own. That is why outreach cannot be responsible for the entire process. Which brings us to the second point. The work has to be divided. People need different things at different stages of their growth. Outreach, growth, and development are different jobs because a person walking through those doors for the first time is not in the same place as the person who's been wrestling with the ideas for years. When we collapse those stages, strangers receive purity tests, participants receive titles, and people are handed responsibility before they have organized or have any idea of what they're even trying to say. And the work also has to be divided across the different kinds of abilities. The question isn't, is this person ready for more? It's what kind of work are they becoming capable of doing? Where does that work fit? And who will help them become better at it? That brings us to the most overused piece of advice in American cinema. Build it and they will come. But that's not always true, is it? Sometimes they won't come. You can build somebody nobody wants, and congratulations, you have an empty thing. But there's a deeper question underneath the line, have we built something that people actually want to join? People don't join movements merely because the arguments are technically correct. They join because they find people they trust, community where they belong, and somewhere their contributions matter. They stay when that community helps them grow. And they take ownership when the work is real. They become multipliers when somebody helps them discover that they are good, what they're good at, and trains them to do it well. The Field of Dreams line only gets us through the front door. Building the space isn't enough. We have to direct that energy through a path. The movement does not need more people who can explain liberty. It needs more people who can create environments where liberty is experienced. We don't need to become the church. That's not the point of this at all. And I'm not suggesting we recreate Christianity or borrow its theology or any of that. But we should stop ignoring what effective churches have learned over centuries of trial and error. They learned that you need a pastor, but you also need support staff. And these aren't uniquely religious lessons, they're human lessons. If we believe in voluntary cooperation, we should be very good at creating things that people voluntarily cooperate with. If we believe that individuals are capable of governing themselves, our organizations should help people develop competence and character to carry out responsibility. If we believe in freedom, we should build communities where people experience the difference between being controlled and being invited, and where that invitation leads somewhere after they accept it. So, if you've ever felt like you were wandering in the woods in this movement, looking up every few years and realizing you're in the same clearing you were just in, and nothing seems to be moving forward, the issue isn't how hard you've been walking. You're putting in the work, and I'm proud of you. But without a map and a goal, our best efforts are simply creating nicer places for which to begin wandering again. You don't have to leave this room ready to start a movement. You don't have to become the person running everything tomorrow. That's the exact mistake we've been talking about. The next step is just to take the next step and keep walking. But this time, start using the map. Know where people enter and what they need. Learn who they are and what they're good at. And build paths into every kind of work the movement needs. We have spent enough years walking hardly only to arrive back at the same starting point. So let's keep walking, build a path that leads somewhere, and make sure it's still there and even clearer for the person coming behind you. And now, to give a great talk about a place that has built a good amount of this community and a lot of the things that I've just talked about, the one and only Mr. Eric Brakey.
All right. Oh, so we're like recording this. Oh, it's live streamed. All right. Hello, people present and people of the internet. All right. Well, and it is a beautiful day, and I haven't spent much time in Michigan, but it's kind of awesome to be here at Lake Satoshi and to recognize this is a beautiful state. Or at least there are parts of it that are beautiful. I'm sure there's some parts of it that are pretty ugly too, but thankfully you guys hosted in the beautiful parts. So thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you for the interest in what I have to talk about. I think kind of understand the significance of what I have to talk about. Maybe it helps to understand a little bit first about me and my personal journey. I've been in the liberty movement since the Tea Party days and the second half of the Ron Paul Revolution. I am somewhat embarrassed to look back at my younger days, being plugged into Fox News, believing everything that Sean Hannity and Bill O'Reilly told me, particularly about the wars. I'm most embarrassed about that these days, especially at the Peace and Liberty Festival. I remember the first time I read Ron Paul's book, The Revolution, a Manifesto. 2010, my older brother gave it to me, and I thought, boy, he makes a lot of sense about everything except for foreign policy. Boy, he couldn't be more wrong there. And yet, even as I read it, I kind of knew. I just wasn't willing to admit it to myself because I internalized it so much into my identity, this politics of the time, the wars, making the world safe for democracy, spreading freedom at the barrel of a gun. It was hard to admit that I'd been duped, I'd been lied to, and then I had been a young cheerleader for the mass murder of innocent people around the world. And a lot of good people in those days were suckered into that as well. When I realized what a lie it was and how people in power had preyed upon us, preyed upon our virtues in particular, to get us to support great evil, my life took a turn, and I decided, I want to get involved as an activist and support this man, Ron Paul, as he made his run for president in 2012. I didn't quite know how to do it. I just was graduating college. I was moving to New York City. I left the Midwest. Actually, I was born and raised in Ohio. I left the Midwest, went to New York City, was working as a professional actor, trying to work as a professional actor, was starting to have some success. But I got involved there with a grassroots Ron Paul movement there, and the sense of community that I felt with those folks as we built a clubhouse in Soho, New York City, as we went out tabling in the streets, recruiting more people, as we had protests outside the headquarters for CNN and all these news outlets based in New York City. And that led to a job opportunity that I initially said no to. I had planned my whole life to work in the theater and be an actor, and I said, I'm not leaving that behind, but I saw, I reflected on how much Dr. Paul had sacrificed, decades and decades in Congress, being the lone voice in the wilderness, disregarded as he spoke the truth to the powerful who would rather he shut up, and yet he persisted and kept going. And I thought, this seems like an important moment in history. There's an awakening that's happening right now, and maybe I should kind of be more than a part-time player in this, and I should go do what I can to make a difference. So I accepted that job, and I went to Maine, where I was born and raised in Ohio. My family goes back in Maine for many generations, and my parents had just retired up that way. And what I thought was going to be just kind of something I was going to be doing for a single election cycle, we ended up having so much more success than I imagined that I couldn't walk away. At the age of 23, as the state director for the Ron Paul campaign in Maine, we took over the whole state Republican Party of the state. And I found myself like the dog who caught the car, not sure what I was supposed to do with it. Once I had it, it's like, well, I guess I can't. I guess I'm not going back to a life of theater. Though my wife would tell me these days, "What are you talking about? You get to speak and be in front of people. You get to do plenty of theater. It's not the same. Not the same." But I really put my all into it. I decided after that Ron Paul campaign, and of course he wasn't running again, and there was no leader. He kind of took that torch of liberty he'd been carrying for so many years, and he said, "It's yours now. It's your revolution. You've got to take it. You've got to carry it." And people would go to Dr. Paul and they would say, Dr. Paul, I want to help fight for liberty. Please tell me what to do. And he would say, "You got to figure that out for yourself." You know, no central planner, Dr. Paul. No one will ever accuse him of that. He was not a central planner. You got to figure that out for yourself. There's a job out there for you, but you got to find it. And there are many different ways to advance liberty. For me, I decided I wanted to help his son, Rand Paul, get elected president in 4 years. So I said, all right, well, I'm going to see what I can do to position myself to help with that. And so I thought, it's kind of an embarrassing reason to look back on and think why I did this, but I thought, maybe I would be more effective if instead of being just some young activist, if I was a state senator. So I ran for the state Senate, and nobody thought I had any chance whatsoever. I was running against a Democrat who'd been in elected office for 36 consecutive years. He'd been in elected office longer than I'd been alive, and nobody knew who I was. But I just went out and I knocked on close to 8,000 doors. I talked to people. I talked to them about how we could fix the problems they were concerned about with more liberty instead of more government. And that year in 2014, at the age of 26, I beat him by 18 points. It was a landslide. Nobody saw it coming. I certainly didn't. I was nervous until the last vote came in. But I thought, wow, we achieved something here, and there were a few more Liberty people who were getting elected in the House. And so I took that opportunity and I ran with it. And my first term in the Maine Senate, in a time of divided government, Republicans in control of the Senate, Democrats in control of the House, Republican governor, fairly good one, not perfect, but fairly good as far as Republicans go. It's a low bar. Democrats, it's an even lower bar, but I was able to pull together some really awesome bipartisan coalitions, and I passed the first constitutional carry law. Well, not the first in the country, but the sixth in the country, the first in Maine. I guess you only have to do it once. Overhauled our whole state's medical cannabis program, created one of the most based on market principles. It's one of the best programs in the country. This is what happens when libertarians write the marijuana laws instead of Democrats writing the marijuana laws. You actually makes economic sense. Sometimes I think, boy, I wish Republicans would support these things because they understand economics better. They could actually make the programs function. Instead, they just want to be prohibitionists. And anyway, I was very proud of a lot of the accomplishments that I got done in my first two terms in the Maine Senate. I left. I was kind of feeling the high of these victories, and I thought, in 2018, Rand's run for president kind of fell flat. And I thought, boy, the Liberty Movement needs some kind of races to rally around. So I ran for the U.S. Senate. I won the Republican nomination against U.S. Senator Angus King. There's a whole story about how I ended up in the Twitter files because of that race, because he went to the Twitter executives, tried to get me and my supporters censored. That's a longer story. Made a run for Congress, worked for Young Americans for Liberty, helped build their kind of coalition of liberty legislators around the country. Went back to the Maine Senate for one more term, took it from the Democrats, that seat back from the Democrats. And at a certain point in time, it was 12 years of doing this in the state of Maine, a beautiful state. Like this lake, this scenery behind us could be ripped right out of Maine. Beautiful state. and the people there, salt of the earth, connected to that revolutionary spirit from 1776. You can trace it all the way back to the Battle of Machias, the first naval battle of the American Revolution. But something really sad was happening in Maine. I thought for a while that we were on a good track. There was the state next to us, New Hampshire, and they had this movement I was familiar with, the Free State Project, and I would go to some of their events like the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and I thought, all right, we're going to have a healthy competition. Who can advance freedom the fastest? But what happened in 2018, when I left the Maine Senate and ran for the U.S. Senate, Democrats took every single thing in the state. They took the House, they took the Senate, they took the governorship, and things never turned around after that. In fact, they passed some really bad laws that made a very permanent impact on the state. One of those laws was eliminating the religious and philosophical exemptions for vaccines for school children. So even if your child was enrolled in a virtual online charter school, they had to have the full vaccine schedule. Your kid's sitting there at home on the computer. Nope, can't get an education unless you get every single jab that they say that you have to. And beyond the problem and the clear violation of people's liberties in this regard, it also meant that in Maine, some of our best families reached their breaking point. And they said, it is not safe here anymore for my kids. And when you feel that, you start to think about leaving. And many of them did. They left. At the same time, during those years in Maine, they expanded welfare programs. They established in state law welfare for asylum seekers and non-citizens who don't qualify for benefits, and pretty much 80% of the other states of the country don't qualify for federal benefits, but come to Maine and you get taxpayer-funded benefits. They expanded Medicaid for childless, able-bodied adults. And so what we saw in Maine was the effects of migration on the politics of the state. In-migration and out-migration. Our best liberty-loving families moving out, and people moving to the state, not for what they could build, not for the opportunity to work and to create something, to create value for others, but people moving in because they were promised free stuff. And of course, politically speaking, this changes the underlying voting demographics of the state. And southern Maine, which is kind of a hub for progressivism and socialism, became more and more populous with more and growing in more and more power. The rural parts of the state became more and more politically weak. And Maine is now on a trajectory. I don't see that. I don't know that in my lifetime it can turn around. But in New Hampshire, the opposite was happening. I remember around the same time, there was a moment where things stumbled. Democrats took things in New Hampshire for a cycle, but then it flipped around the next cycle. And actually, I see elections in New Hampshire just like in Maine, where control of the legislature was decided by a couple hundred votes scattered across a few districts, right? In Maine, it went one way. In New Hampshire, it went the other. But those, politically speaking, that made all the difference. In New Hampshire, there is the Free State Project. The Free State Project has existed for 25 years now. And it was an idea by our founder, Jason Sorens, who's in New Hampshire and still active on our board of directors. And actually, here. This is our founding documents of the Free State Project. Announcement, the Free State Project. It was just an idea 25 years ago. And the idea was this: the recognition that the National Libertarian Party strategy had failed and continued to fail election cycle after election cycle after election cycle. At that point in time, it had been like 3 decades of the National Libertarian Party, and they had produced 0 electoral victories for any federal office in the country. And maybe you can point to here or there, like lately, maybe some local races that are nonpartisan, maybe a state legislative race here or there where there's not a Republican or a Democrat on the ballot, and so you can kind of get a clear head-to-head. But the National Libertarian Party was a failing strategy. And fast forward to today, it's pretty much the same. it's continuing with that strategy and it's continued to produce zero results. Sometimes it feels like the definition of insanity, beating your head against a wall, expecting things to change, and they don't. And it's clear why it doesn't. It's because we live in a rule that is in a system that is designed with rules created by the two major parties to make it so that third parties cannot compete. And however much we wish it to be different, it can't change until you win and are in a position to change the rules. But if you don't build a strategy around the rules as they are, you'll never win and you'll never be able to change the rules. So the Free State Project was an idea of a different strategy. I kind of like to think of this as when Martin Luther pinned his theses to the doors of the Catholic Church to say we've got to have a reformation, we've got to do something different. And the idea was a recognition that there are millions of libertarians around this country, but we're like a diaspora. We're scattered. We don't exist in any singular concentration in any one particular place, not in enough of a concentration to have a real sizable impact on the politics and the culture around us. And while this country was founded on these ideas, while this country was founded in 1776 in that spirit of revolution and that spirit of liberty and individual rights, and it's written throughout our founding documents from the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and even to some degree to the Constitution. That spirit over 10 generations has really waned. But there is that remnant. There are millions of people. There is me. There is you. There are those of us here, and there are millions more around the country. But as long as we're scattered, we don't have any real political or cultural power. So the idea was this. What if you could get just 20,000 of those millions to move to one place, to one small state? Preferably a state that already has an existing libertarian culture and ethic where you're building on what's already there. You're kind of tipping the scales rather than kind of reinventing the wheel. And so there was an early process in the first 2 years of the first 1,000 signers to decide what that state would be. I don't know if Michigan was on the list. Probably not. Michigan was probably considered too large a state. But they looked at 10 different states, and New Hampshire was selected, the live free or die state. And the idea was if you get 20,000 libertarians to sign the pledge to make the move, then once you trigger that with the 20,000th person signs, you will trigger the move and everyone will follow through and move. It took some time, and some people decided they weren't going to wait. People started moving in 2003. We didn't trigger the move with 20,000 signers until 2016. And not everyone followed through on the pledge to make the move, but about half did. So we have about 10,000 who've made the move, and more still making the move. You can sign the statement of intent today. The statement of intent basically just says that you intend to live in New Hampshire, and you intend to make your fullest practical effort towards building a society where the maximum role of government is protecting life, liberty, and property. It's pretty simple. And there's no central plan to it. Whatever that means to you, you get to come and you get to build it. And I think, again, back to kind of what Ron Paul said, that there's a job out there for you, but you got to find it. There's no central plan to it. My path, I decided to go into politics, and a lot of people in New Hampshire have gone the political path. We have, at this point, as our movement has matured, New Hampshire has the largest legislative body in the country outside of Congress itself. 400 members of the New Hampshire House of Representatives. 400 in a state of 1.2 million people. And they all get paid like $100 a year, plus tolls, for driving into work. So it's really a volunteer legislature, and it's for the political parties, like half the battle is just finding people to run for these 400 seats. Now we got a lot of people who are just saying, we're ready to run. We signed a pledge to do our maximum practical efforts towards building a society where the maximum role of government is protecting life, liberty, and property. And so, over time, there was a lot of resistance, in the two major parties against these free staters, these libertarians trying to, they would say, infiltrate our parties and to change them and to change things. I would say that these parties were co-opted a long time ago. And, when I look back at the party of Robert Taft, who was once called Mr. Republican, and Barry Goldwater, that doesn't certainly seem like the party that became the party of George W. Bush and now the party of Donald Trump. But Free staters and libertarians have, since the 2010 Tea Party days, have been pretty successful at getting elected as Republicans in New Hampshire. Though the first free stater elected in New Hampshire was elected as a Democrat. And that lasted for like one term. And he was chased out. The Democrats, they don't really seem, especially these days, they don't seem to have any room for kind of the libertarian spirit, at least not among the political class of the Democratic Party. Maybe among some of the, the rank and file, people who are often disconnected from the political leaders. But now, in 2026, we have about half of the Republican caucus are free state libertarians. The House Majority Leader is a free state libertarian, and he's likely to be the Speaker of the House next year if Republicans, if Donald Trump doesn't drag down the whole Republican ticket, including on the state level. We would have maybe perhaps the first ever anarcho-capitalist Speaker of a state house. We have passed laws for gun rights, for school choice, for tax abolition, for health freedom, and on and on. New Hampshire is ranked in the Freedom of the 50 States Index as the #1 state for freedom in America. And particularly on economic freedom, has been ranked by other indexes as the #1 state for economic freedom in all of North America. I wonder, what other continents is anyone competing with us? I would suggest we're probably the #1 in the world, but no one's measured that yet. Maybe Antarctica is more free, but good luck, enjoying that freedom down there. And despite what people say about the winters, it's not as bad as Antarctica. And certainly here in Michigan, you probably get some real winters too. Personally, I like the winters. I think real winters make for real civilization. But the politics is the easy thing to focus on because it's the easiest thing to point to victories. Look at how many legislators we've elected. Look at how many laws we've passed. And look at all the policies that are in place. Look at the level of freedom that exists in the political sense. What is sometimes harder to articulate, and is something that really has to be seen to be understood, is the value of the community and the culture of liberty that exists in New Hampshire. Now, in part, that's always been there to some degree, right? This is the live free or die state. Like New Hampshire is the state where the American Revolution began. Don't let the people in Massachusetts tell you otherwise. They just wrote the history books, right? Oh, the Boston Tea Party. Okay, Boston Tea Party was pretty great. But before the Boston Tea Party, there was the Pine Tree Riot in Ware, New Hampshire. And this is where, a little revolutionary history. The King of England had declared ownership of all the pine trees in New England as his because they needed them for the masts for their ships for the British Navy. And folks in Ware, New Hampshire were caught cutting down those trees for their own benefit. And when the king's enforcers tried to enforce that law, the people rose up and said, "Hell no, fuck you, you're not the boss of us," and they ran them out of town. And this was kind of like the first real violence in what would become the American Revolution. New Hampshire was, in fact, here we are celebrating 250 years of American independence. Every other, all the other states that were kind of the original colonies get to celebrate on July 4th, but New Hampshire gets to celebrate in January because New Hampshire declared its independence 6 months before all the rest of them and formed its own independent state government, the first in the New World. So that spirit, that history is there. Now, in New Hampshire, progressives, and I say progressives not in a sense of like, people who, believe in gay marriage or this or that, I mean people who want to progressively increase the size and scope of government beyond constitutional limits. In fact, there are a lot of progressive Republicans when you think of it that way too. But the progressive movement in New Hampshire, they don't spend their time attacking Republicans. They spend their time attacking free staters. In fact, every Republican that they hate, they accuse of being a secret free stater. It's like the free staters. We've become the monster under their bed. We are the boogeyman they tell their children about at night, right? It's that, the free staters are coming to, destroy your government schools. Well, We just give people choice. And if they choose to leave the government schools and the government schools lose funding, then maybe there's a problem with the government schools. But it is very interesting to look around, and I don't know another state in the country where the libertarians are the political force that that are being contended with. So the political victories are there, but I was getting to the culture and the culture and the community. Around New Hampshire, we have Liberty clubhouses. I was just the other day at the Quill Clubhouse in New Hampshire. I'm sorry, in Manchester, New Hampshire, which was established in 2010. It's been operating for 16 years. This is like a community center for libertarians. We have potluck dinners. We have all kinds of events. We have a podcast studio there. We have a family room there. People build all kind of community there, and it's been so successful that these clubhouses have started popping up in all corners of New Hampshire where Free Staters grow enough concentration to kind of put themselves in the map in this way. We have one in the Seacoast. We have one up north in Lancaster. We have, depending on how you count it, like 6 or 7 clubhouses around the state. I don't know. Do you know any other states where there's a single libertarian clubhouse, a single libertarian community center where libertarians are building culture and community in physical proximity with each other together? Something very unique that happens with this concentration strategy of so many libertarians coming together in a singular place. We are one generation in now, and there's a second generation of Free State babies that are coming up. They're now like of adult age and are voting and running for the legislature themselves. We are creating a self-perpetuating culture and community, and we continue bringing in more people as we grow in momentum. We continue bringing more people, welcoming more people into the community. We are achieving a certain escape velocity that's going to be very hard to stop so long as we continue moving forward. Now, nothing is certain, Certainly, one of the weaknesses I think right now is that all of our political eggs are in one basket in the Republican Party, and Donald Trump is really not doing good things for the Republican brand. So we'll see we'll see kind of how things go this election cycle, because as I saw in Maine, one bad election cycle can wipe out a lot of progress. But if we continue bringing more people in, continue growing our community, we are really in a good position to build kind of the libertarian homeland. We are taking ideas that have only existed in libertarian white papers like school choice, and we're putting them into reality and showing that they work. And it's such a relief for me, having been in politics, in the arena of politics for 12 years. It's a relief for me to come to a place where, frankly, in New Hampshire, I'm not really involved in politics. There are so many other people doing that fight. I just get to focus on growing community and building community. I've started groups like the Free State Theater. Got libertarians together. Like, I finally get to do theater again with people who don't hate me, because I don't want to be, have my money confiscated from me, and I don't want to be pushed around and told I've got to get like a COVID vax, jab and show my papers in order to be a part of society. Like, it was certainly hard to try to be in any theater communities during that period of time, but in New Hampshire, we can build our own libertarian theater communities because there are enough libertarians of all different stripes and interests that we can build these things, right? Started the Free State Stoics, where we talk about philosophy and we look at how do we build, how do we apply the principles of Stoicism and virtue to living a good life and building a free society. There are rucking groups, there are D&D groups, there are family groups, there are any kind of group you can imagine, any hobby that you have, you can build it in New Hampshire with people who share your values. And that's something that's truly unique and something that has to be experienced. Now, we have a lot of events year-round that we are always inviting visitors. And I know certainly we want people to move. And I certainly would invite all of you to think about if that was something that made sense for you. We would welcome any of you. But I know that that's not practical for everyone, and that's a very big decision to make. But what I would really ask is that you get connected with us. I write. In fact, I was sitting over there all day today working on our weekly newsletter. It's an email newsletter. It's the most optimistic and realistic libertarian newsletter you'll ever receive, right? It's optimistic because there's so many good things happening, and it's realistic because they're actually happening, right? Sometimes I get libertarian newsletters that are optimistic. I'm like, boy, this guy is so, not grounded in reality. This year, the Libertarian Party is going to take the presidency. Oh, man, that's optimistic. That is not realistic, right? I would invite you, and I'll see if we can get kind of passed around our sign-up sheet for that. I would love to connect with you, to be in touch with you. And I would love it if you would come for a visit sometime. We have there's a libertarian event, a Free State event happening almost every single day in New Hampshire. You could literally just put a calendar of the year up on the wall. You could throw a dart at it and pick a day, and there will be a libertarian event that's happening. It might be a Bitcoin meetup. It might be a wrecking group. It might be the Porcupine Freedom Festival. It might be, one of our bigger events. In October 17th, we're having our second annual Granite Freedom Trek. We're hiking a mountain. We're climbing Mount Pierce. It's if you love the outdoors and you like that, that's a great reason, opportunity to visit New Hampshire. But there's stuff going on all the time, and we have a calendar on our website at fsp.org where you can see all these events that our community is building. And we are all about welcoming visitors and movers. And I'm really honored at this kind of stage of my life, after kind of like 12 years in the political arena, to kind of focus on building something that's not just fighting for the next election cycle, not just fighting for political survival, but building something intergenerational. And the more we build it, the more it will stand. And New Hampshire can stand as an example to the world that freedom does in fact work when you give it a chance to do so. So that's a little bit about New Hampshire. There's a few books here I want to tell you about. Some we got for free, some we got for sale. First of all, let me ask, anyone here have any inclination to visit New Hampshire? All right. For those folks, I've got a free passport for you for when you visit New Hampshire. It's a series of activities you can do when you visit New Hampshire, and I will get these to the three of you and to any others who would be interested in visiting New Hampshire. So this is the first book I have for you: A Passport to the Free State of New Hampshire. The next book is, I mentioned this, I got these for sale for $5. This is an announcement, the Free State Project. This is just the idea, the strategy as it was written 25 years ago, our founding documents. If you're curious about the concentration strategy of gathering libertarians into one place and how it all began. This next book is my book that I've written. Now, this is for the political people who are interested in running for office, or maybe helping those who do run for office, whether that's in New Hampshire or here in Michigan or where else. This is the Liberty Candidate's Practical Guide to Door Knocking. This is my 13-rule system for how to be effective at door knocking. As I mentioned, I took out a 36-year Democrat incumbent by knocking on 8,000 doors, but it wasn't just the quantity of the doors, it was the quality of the interactions and forming connections with those people. If that's of interest to you, we got these for sale for $10. And then we have Growing Liberty, Nurturing Personal Economic Freedom in an Unfree World by Matt Barney. This is for sale for $15 over there. And these are profiles of Free Staters who have been leaders in the Free State community and the many different paths that you can be a leader, right? It doesn't have to just be political. I know, and I was being told as I came in here, Eric, a lot of folks here are more agorist and they don't like the political path. And that's fine, right? A lot of people who join the Free State movement in New Hampshire never touch politics. We certainly encourage them to come out and vote, at very least, for like Free Staters who are running for office. But some people are building, farm networks and homeschool networks. Some people are building festivals and events. Some people are pioneers in cryptocurrency. In fact, we call New Hampshire the granite cradle of crypto because New Hampshire was really the place where Bitcoin found its first large concentration of early adopters who were pioneers in this in the early 2010s, because right after Ron Paul's campaign, right, we all wanted to end the Fed, and a lot of people were wise enough to say, probably Congress is never going to audit the Fed as much as we like to push that bill. Maybe we need to have like a different path. And so I like to think of those on the political path in New Hampshire are weakening the institutions of the state that oppress us. But those institutions do serve some purpose, right? We just believe that we can build voluntary institutions to replace them. So we have to have the people, as much as we love the people on the political path, we also have to have the people on the non-political path who are building the parallel institutions that are going to replace those state institutions. That's why the folks who are building homeschool networks are so important. The folks who are building alternative currencies are so important. The people who are building are homesteading and building food networks are so important. Whatever your passion is for advancing freedom in New Hampshire, you can pursue that with others to do your fullest practical efforts to build a society where the maximum role of government is protecting life, liberty, and property. It takes the people on the political path, and it takes the people who are building the things to replace the state institutions. So I don't know where we are for time. I think they gave me 30 minutes, but if there is some time, I'd be happy to. If there are any questions or feedback, I'd love to. Do I have any time? Am I? All right, we got a couple minutes. Are there any questions from anyone? Or I enjoy conversation as much as I enjoy talking. Yes. 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 So just to kind of repeat the question for those who are online, as I had stated, the Free State Project was founded as a reaction against the failures of the National Libertarian Party strategy. And you asked to say, is there a differentiation between the Free State Project and the New Hampshire Libertarian Party? Of course, the New Hampshire Libertarian Party is somewhat well known, a little bit. And there are Free Staters who are in leadership of the New Hampshire Libertarian Party. There are also Free Staters who are constantly challenging those folks for control of the New Hampshire Libertarian Party, right? The beautiful thing in the Free State movement is that there is not, there's no central plan, right? There's no embarking orders. I'm certainly not barking orders and saying, do this, do that, right? We're a bunch of individualists. That wouldn't work if anyone tried. So the New Hampshire Libertarian Party is its own organization. We have no formal connection. Certainly, I can't tell them what to do. If I tried, it would not go well. But also, I like to think that the New Hampshire Libertarian Party is also a little bit, the folks who kind of run it now are kind of some of the most is ornery the word I want to use. I think those who want to make because of what's in place in New Hampshire and the inroads that have been made and kind of carving out kind of a huge wing of the Republican Party that is in fact a libertarian wing. In fact, that's so big that it's like the dominant faction in the legislature, at least in the House of Representatives in New Hampshire right now. I think most people who want to make practical political, progress get involved in the Republican Party and things like the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, which is doing kind of like a lot of legislative lobbying, and I think kind of those who, and so there's kind of a filter. People filter kind of where what's important to them. Some people want to cause a ruckus online and through other means, and so yeah, the New Hampshire Libertarian Party is, in a sense, represents to some degree one tribe of the Free State movement. But the Free State movement should be understood as like many tribes, right? And if you came to New Hampshire, you would find your tribe. It's kind of like I kind of sometimes I hate to use the comparison because of kind of how that whole thing is going these days. But I think there's we can kind of look at Israel as a interesting kind of example, right? This was an idea of there was a diaspora, came together, concentrated in one place to try to carve out a homeland. And that was based on kind of ethnicity and stuff that we're not based on, right? We're based on ideas and civic values. But like I kind of look back in the Bible, right? There were like 13 tribes of Israel. Like there are many tribes of in the Free State Movement in New Hampshire. And I often think about a really great book that I recommend. It's not for sale because it's not by one of our people, but it's called Tribalism is Dumb by Andrew Heaton. I recommend it. So we had Andrew Heaton come and speak at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum a few years ago about this. And some things that are really struck me from that was this idea of this thing called Dunbar's number. And Dunbar's number is the maximum group size that humans are built for, like our brains are built for. And in fact, in every single like species of mammals, there's different numbers. For humans, it's about 300, right? At about 300, we can have close kinship bonds and feel like we know people in a group that's about 300. But once a group gets above that size, that's when you start needing name tags. People start becoming abstractions. It's harder to have kind of high trust. And so any group that kind of grows beyond 300 is going to start to naturally kind of break into different factions and different tribes. And so the fact that, we have 10,000, as you can imagine, there's a lot of different groups, a lot of different tribes, and not everyone likes each other. But I would prefer that the libertarians on the internet who yell at each other, I would prefer that they move to New Hampshire and yell at each other in person. That's what I would prefer. And then maybe they would come to a barbecue cookout together and realize like, oh, this is a real human being. Maybe there's more to just kind of what we've been yelling about. And maybe there's actually some common ground we can all find together. Some of these folks who are kind of notorious online, you would be surprised if you met them in person that it's like, am I really talking to the same person here? People are ways online, and I sometimes wish I could convince them to be otherwise. But I also, as a Stoic, I recognize what is in my control and what is not in my control. And I focus on the things that are within my control. So, but I will say, beyond LPNH and beyond like the GOP, as I mentioned, there's groups for all different kinds of things. I mentioned the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, which is kind of a grassroots group. They like rate every single bill in the legislature, whether it's pro-liberty or anti-liberty, and they give all the legislators this gold standard report on, how to vote on the bills, and they rate every single legislator with an A+ to a CT for constitutional threat, and they put it out every single year. That's all volunteer driven. These are productive people doing productive things. And then there's all the non-political things groups as well. So, and you can always just build your own group. I've done it several times, and anyone can. So thank you for the question. Any other questions? Yeah, what's the question? Yeah, the question is, so the Twitter files, how did I end up in the Twitter files? So when I was running for the U.S. Senate against U.S. Senator Angus King of Maine, this is 2018, and now we're in this war with Russia. We weren't at the time, but there was saber rattling for it, and this U.S. Senator was a big part of it. And I was at a 9/11 commemoration event in Auburn, Maine, my state Senate district, and he was invited to speak, and he was talking about how, it used to be they flew planes into towers, but now with a computer, they hack our elections from Russia. And I just thought, wow, that is a really kind of bold assertion to make at a 9/11, commemoration event, that like it was that the conspiracies of Russian election hacking were his words, the same kind of attack on America as 9/11. So we recorded it and we put it up online and we sent it to the media. Now the local media wouldn't cover it. There's a weird way that they treat Angus King like no other politician. I think it's because he started as a member of the media. But Breitbart and Tucker Carlson picked it up and covered it, and it went kind of pretty viral online and on Twitter. Angus King's campaign went to the Twitter executives and tried to get the video pulled down. They said we took him out of context. We didn't. And they also sent to the Twitter, the team at Twitter, like a list of accounts that were accounts that they should look into, right? That maybe these were Russian bots, or maybe they were, spreaders of disinformation. And it was like, all my supporters. We're just saying things about him that weren't very nice. So when Matt Taibbi got access to the Twitter files and was publishing these things, this was years later. I found out that this censorship was going on. We don't really know everything about it because, like, I know that I went through a lot of those profiles and discovered that a lot of them were deactivated. But this was years after the fact, so who knows if it was because Twitter deactivated them because Angus King asked them to. But I also thought it was pretty interesting. It's like Angus King was like on the Senate Intelligence Committee. He's a very powerful U.S. senator, kind of using his position of privilege to put pressure on these companies to censor his political critics. So I thought that was fairly disgusting, and that's how I ended up in the Twitter files. Yeah, thank you for your question. Yeah. I am too. Whatever criticisms I might have for Elon Musk, it certainly did help promote free speech. Any other questions or feedback or anything at all? Nobody's gotten a cane yet to pull me off stage, so whether I'm over on time or not, they haven't told me. But if there is nothing else, I'll just say thank you for being here. It's a beautiful place to be. I really, one of my goals really is, like, my friend Dennis Pratt has told me, Eric, your job title is executive director, but you're really like our Secretary of State. My job is to go out into the world and connect with lovers of liberty, and to be kind of like an ambassador, to be kind of like, to make connections with people who share our values. So whether you have any intention of moving to New Hampshire at all, or any intention of visiting at all, and if all you do is visit, by the way, we're just grateful that you visit. Come for one of our events. You don't have to move, though. Once you visit, we will try to persuade you, but we will still love you even if you don't. My goal really is to make connections, and the most obvious way I can make a connection is to get your email address and to be in touch with you with our weekly email newsletter. It is a good newsletter. I write it myself, and I'm a very good writer, I promise you. And if you unsubscribe, I won't even notice. I mean, maybe I'll notice, right? And I'll say, bam. Well, anyway, but you won't want to unsubscribe because it's a great newsletter. It is wonderful, positive news coming from the number one state for freedom in America as we keep advancing freedom. So you might find links to media hits that we're doing, like Are You Smarter Than a Politician? That will probably be in the next newsletter because we're recording that tomorrow. It's my second time on the program. It includes, sometimes my favorite thing is all the whining from Progressive Status in New Hampshire. They are truly our best advertisers as they whine and complain about all the progress that we're making. Anyway, and so much more. So we do have a sign-up sheet. I will probably carry that around and pester you to sign up for that so that I can stay in touch. Would really love to. Thank you so much for having me. And Michigan is beautiful, and actually I looked it up on Freedom in the 50 States Index. It's like number 7. It's respectable in the top 10. Yeah, I mean, not number 1, but it's a lot better than I thought I was going to find when I looked it up. So congratulations on doing better than 43 other states. So, all right, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Eric. I can attest, once you visit once, they will not stop trying to convince you to move, but it's still worth visiting for sure. All right, so next up we have some live music that will be starting around 6 p.m. So between now and then, go grab some liquids and fluids, grab something to eat, get yourself a little bit drunker, and then come back and be ready to party.
And don't forget to buy yourself some 50/50 tickets. Again, drawing is tomorrow. But yeah, it looks like we are getting ready to set up for some live music. So make sure you're back here up at the pavilion. We are going to have us a good old time. And I figured that'll roll nicely into the evening of debauchery and drug use and alcoholism and all the fun things. But